Hello, happy birthday to the mother. Today is my mom's birthday, and yesterday I had to call her with the news that was not so pleasant, which is Coach K is retiring after this next season. And as she said, that's quite a jolt. But let's talk about what he taught us and how we can go on from here. Hello, my loves. As many of you know, I am a Duke grad. I was born and bred a Duke fan. My parents were already, I think, members of Iron Dukes before I was even born, or if not, soon thereafter. Back before Duke was any good, Dad invested in them and invested in Coach K, and they actually became good friends. So I grew up with this guy in my life in all kinds of ways, both as someone who I have seen had dinner with my parents in the living room to someone who I watch on TV all the time and adore from afar because he's amazing. So Coach K is retiring, as we know, and he announced it yesterday, June 2nd, which is also Lou Gehrig's day, which for me was significant. So I thought it would be a great time to take a moment, take a pause. I love to mark things, and whether it be on the calendar or just mark them within the universe, and just kind of acknowledge all the things that Coach K has taught us through the years. Outside of swear words, which he knows a lot of because he's an Army guy. So Coach K, he has always been family first, whether it be his wife Mickey, whether it be his daughters, his grandkids, always family, number one. They're the ones that make the decisions. His wife is definitely the boss. He does what she says. And he also considers his players to be his family. And not just when they're on the court with him, but for years after. And we see that. We see how he operates, right? Like he has his players go through. Those who are interested in coaching often end up on his bench, learning from the best. He's handing the reins to a former player. This is just in his blood, right? He came from a Polish family. He came from immigrants. He's from that kind of bread and butter. But always lets that be first when he's trying to make a decision, when he's trying to decide what to do. And that's a good thing for us to remember, right? Like if we find our families to be a part of our lives that is super important, whether that be the families we're born into or the families that we choose as our friends and dear ones, we need to take that into account when we're making choices about what to do with our lives, whether it be to retire and spend more time with our families, or whether it be that we had something happen with this pandemic that helped us realize, like, hey, I was not balancing everything the way I wanted it to be, so I'm going to make some different choices right now. I'm going to start working from home, or I'm going to cut back my hours, or I'm going to look at my kids' school situation because I realized I'm not pleased with it. Whatever that may be, I'm going to spend more time with my loved one, my spouse, my partner, and make time for us outside of all this craziness that's been going on with the pandemic. Whatever that means to you, like take a pause. Like this is a good way to follow, a good model of how to be when it comes to Coach K, outside of the fact he's amazing. Friendships. So I mentioned to you that my dad and Coach K actually became friends way back when. Well, for those who don't follow Duke like myself and my family and friends who are good friends of me, Coach K wasn't always like Coach K. He was Mike Krzyzewski, but he was not the GOAT. He was not the guy that all these players were like dropping everything to go spend a year with before they headed off to the NBA or to get coached by within the Olympics. He was a guy that just came over from Army and was given an opportunity. And frankly, Duke sucked when he first started. Like we were 12-17. I was made fun of in North Carolina, growing up in Greenville, North Carolina, shout out ECTC, for being a Duke fan. Like this is what people picked on me for. That and my Irish skin, which is an obvious get. But Duke sucked. So it was not something that you would necessarily be shouting off the rooftops back then. But so people didn't want Coach K, believe it or not. The Iron Dukes, the folks who supported the team, the folks who give the money, actually wanted his head. They wanted him out of there. And my dad actually reached out to him as a fellow immigrant. My parents are both from Ireland. As someone who speaks funny, so understands having a funny last name, and said, dude, like, I have your back. I believe in what you're doing. I think that your model is going to work. My dad was always kind of a gambler, and made good choices with his gambling choices. But, just kind of reached out and said, hey, I've got your back. I support you. Just want to let you know that. And Coach K wrote him back. Coach K, we actually still have that letter. And, thanked him for the support, talked about his own Polish heritage, talked about how his family's difficulties with following the American dream, and they became friends, and he stayed friends with my parents. He's one that I think if my mom and I were walking down the street and he saw my mother, he would do what he always does, which is drop everything and come over and say hello. I mentioned that his retiring on Lou Gehrig's day is significant for me because my dad died from ALS, and Coach K sent us a mass card, which for the Irish Catholics and the Polish Catholics is a big deal. And that just kind of acknowledged that shared being that they had together. He wasn't able to make it because he was actually doing the Olympics, but he sent his second and third folks in command and sent the mass card, which was really meaningful to my mom. Since Dad died, actually my dad's sister, Dolores, was the headmistress of a school, and she donated a beautiful trophy to the school for the it was a girls' school, for the girls' basketball team, to honor a team member every year. And that coach actually reached out, got the name of Coach K's secretary, who he's had since probably the 80s, God bless her, and said, I'm nobody, but we have this award. We actually named it after Jarlath McKenna, my dad. I hear that he and Coach K were friends. If Coach K has a moment to maybe throw me a few words, if he could. And he totally did. He wrote something beautiful about friendship, about how much he valued my dad's friendship, and talked about what a hard worker my dad was, which is funny because he's also, as you know, an incredibly hard worker, which really gets to my next thing that we learned from him, which is challenging yourself, challenging those around you. In that letter, he talked about stepping up as a player and how he's sure the girl who was winning this award was doing that just like the man that the award was named after. He loves challenging his players. He loves putting them into situations that are going to work for the team, but also help them get to the next level. And he does that with his life. This is part of his leadership style. He actually wrote a book. He's written many books, but Leading with Heart. I read this book when I first became a leader, trying to figure out from the best, how does he do that? What does he do? And really, he's true to his values. That's another thing that we learn from him. Sticking to your values, figuring out what's important to you, how can you be true to that, and how can you put that into the universe, and that, in turn will attract like to like. So that will attract that back to you. And that's part of the magic that is Coach K, is that he sticks with what he believes is true. He looks at his values, decides what's in alignment with those. He does adapt, right? As I mentioned, now folks like Zion Williamson, who we're blessed to have down here in New Orleans, players have gone to him now for their one and done, as we talked about. Back in the day, Duke would win because we had players who stuck around for 4 years and they learned his system and figured out how to do it right. And then they would win all the games. I was there for the 91-92 wins because we knew what we were doing. But with time, the NBA became more attractive. This is a whole different discussion that I'll let some of my friends who are in the sports biz talk about as far as why that is. But instead of fighting that battle and losing to the Kentuckys of the world, he adapted and made it so that these players could come through, and really started to just do what the system was kind of driving him to be able to do, to be able to offer what he has as talents as a coach and a leader to the young people. Because really, for him, what is most important is not just making a good player, but making a good individual and a good man. And to me, that's number one thing about leaders is like, lead for your people, meet them where they're at, help them get where they want to be. Now, if that getting where they want to be means that they're moving out of your organization or moving away from you as a leader, that's okay. Like, it's okay to have people pass through your lives, whether it be your personal life or your professional life, and to honor them with whatever gifts you can give in the moments you're together to help them then move on to a place where they can do the same for others. And in that way, you're really spreading your message beyond what you even know about. And I feel like that is really, to me, the essence of Coach K, why I adore him, why I'm getting a little emotional thinking about him retiring, and partly because it makes me think of my dad, partly because it makes me think of that little girl in Cameron Indoor Stadium who would watch Ralph Simpson like dunk on our team and us lose by 20 points. And then as a student be in the student section while Coach K fussed at us for rubbing it in when we would do the same to another team because he didn't like bullies. You know, like it was fun to be a student in Cameron when we were losing back in the day and being creative and making fun of players because who cares? We sucked. But once we started winning, it wasn't so okay to do that because then you're bullying, and he's not okay with that. And he's the first to say it. So, you know, I know there are folks out there who aren't necessarily or don't like to admit that they're fans of his because they happen to be Carolina and Kentucky fans, but he's a good human. And good humans spread goodness into the universe, and we are grateful for that. I think part of his being a good human is not retiring the same year that Roy is, because he wants his friend to have his moment of retirement, and that's Coach K. Also, I like that I know people are saying like, oh, he's having his like final tour. Yes. But he's also letting the future players know what the deal is. So when they sign on, they know, like, okay, I only get Coach K for a year. Then I'm going to get his number one guy who's going to be right there with him to take over and have the torch passed to him. So with that, I am sending lots of love, and go Devils. Go Duke, forever Duke. Also go Pels. All right. Bye, you guys. I love you.